Good afternoon. It's DayLife Mary. I'm coming to you live from a place with a blue wall. And I don't really want to tell my story. I'm uncomfortable about it at this point for some reason. And I'm like, it's, I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but just like telling it when it's getting to like closer to my actual time in the world right now. Like the part of my story is not so far away now. Maybe that has something to do with it. And it's just uncomfortable. And on that note, if you are watching, why don't you make a wash? What is a wash? It is a sacrifice of your pay matrix belief, primarily stored in your currency. You can make a wash at the links here on this little info graphic. Cash.me/$washitall. PayPal.me/washitall. You can send applepay and zelle to laundruss at automat.me. And you can feel what it's like to have a little soul eke back into your zombified bodies out there in the pain matrix. So, when I last left off, I had graduated the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I had met by proxy Wiesel and Cohen Malone, General Koa, through my boyfriend at the time and his MTV True Life experience, which the General and her husband had declined to do. And they were out of my mind, and I was having a post-breakup summer fest of going a little wild. I went, all of the things that I had been wanting to do but hadn't because I was in this kind of codependent relationship, I got really excited about doing. I was a giant slut as well. I started meeting people online, on like Tinder. When I went home for a couple weeks that summer, I met some people, like at least maybe one or two people. I got back to Chicago. I had moved out and found my own apartment. It was across the street from kind of Douglas Park in Chicago, like South Lawndale, West Pilsen. It was this tiny room. I got a twin bed off of Craigslist that would collapse periodically because it was like not on the right steel. The mattress and the steel frame didn't fit correctly, so sometimes it would collapse. And the bedroom I was in barely fit that bed, but I had a backyard, and I was paying about $275 maybe a month for this apartment. And I was hoeing around Chicago. I was really kind of like freaking out because I did not plan well, and I thought it would be a lot easier to get a job, and it wasn't, and I had trouble finding any job. I was looking in the restaurant industry, and I was looking in hospitality and stores, like shopkeeping, whatever, dog walking. That's where I was at. And I basically was like, oh, I kind of fucked off with this idea that I would just be able to support myself and things would work out. Like I was not equipped in the way that I thought, or at least it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Most of my job experience had been work-study jobs, and then a studio assistant job that I was basically like laid off from because she didn't have any more work for me, and it was a surprise, and I just hadn't planned well enough, and like I didn't think about I had like grand ideas about what I was gonna do, but like the day-to-day of paying my high rent costs of $275 a month, etc., I was a little perplexed. And I was kind of spiraling out. I had, for the first time in my life, left the school and higher education pipeline, kind of just spit out into the city, like expecting a lot of things that I was really naive to expect, that I was brainwashed into expecting would happen by going to school. Like, you're here, so you're going to be successful in your field. You're going to have a certain track, and it's going to be great. And I like got out of that environment, and it was most everyone I had gone to school with, there were like things got realer for everyone after, depending on what that realer meant. Like, the people who had always come from a certain higher level of like money and I don't know, coddling or whatever, it was clear that they went on and continued to do like the grad school track, or were able to like curate apartment shows or like work on their art, and you were like, how does this all work out for them? I am curious. And then you had the other people who were still from respectable family backgrounds, but low self-esteem and low expectations, or things that they like thought that they deserved. And we were all trying to find jobs in the restaurant industry, which we had maybe done while we were in school, but at that point you're like, you can maintain this illusion better because you're like, well, I have this job, but I'm also in school because I have the bigger dream, right? And I don't know, I was just starting to get really bitter about school and what it had made me become. And I was also I don't know, a lot of different things were happening. I was putting my energy into let me just go chronologically, because I'm getting like confused, or I don't know where to start. So this summer, where I was still doing the studio assisting job and it was petering out, and Christopher and I were no longer speaking, but he was still being kind of inappropriate. Like, he found out where my new place was. He went and tried to win me back. He came to my birthday party. I hadn't invited him. I was getting emails and notes and all this kind of stuff that was he was really trying to get back together. And part of it was I did not end on a strong enough note of giving him the death punch of telling him what I actually felt and being super honest and mean. But also he was being extra and he was being inappropriate, and he had a lot of issues letting go. And at the same time, like I left off, I was starting to see multiple other people. I was going on dates all the time. I had started to see two men at the same time more seriously, as in we hung out and it wasn't just a one night stand. And I was drinking heavily at this time. I was I had no more certain types of structures, and I was smoking spliffs every day. I was smoking in this new apartment. I would smoke in my bed spliffs and drink, and my fucking wake up with my computer in my lap open from like the thing I had been watching falling asleep, I was like gross. And like I was saying, my bed, I like had people over and like the bed would collapse. Like, I did not have to be living such a ghetto ass life, but I was like slumming it for authenticity because I was looking for meaning in my life, and I also had like super low fucking standards and self-respect. There was all this kind of shit going on. But hey, I just turned 22. Now it was like September, the fall, and I think I had managed to like barely grab together some, like, I was dog walking and it was horrible. Like, I was like biking around the city to go to like a few dog walking gigs and still trying to get a job. And my mom, her sister was a substitute teacher and told me that in Chicago you only had to have a bachelor's degree in anything, and because the school systems were so desperate for teachers and so underfunded and so understaffed, they allowed anyone with a bachelor's degree to get certified and become a substitute teacher for the Chicago public school system. So I was trying to get that sorted, but it was crazy bureaucracy, a bunch of certifications, like a tuberculosis test, a drug test. So I had to stop smoking weed for a month, which was incredibly difficult. So that was all in the pipeline of like trying to get that figured out, and it was like a vague thing I was trying to like handle, but I didn't really want to do it, or I hadn't gotten like desperate enough. So I was trying to do other things still, and I also was like, well, my rent is so cheap, so I had started renting out a studio in this industrial zone, because I lived in this like border of kind of a park, kind of an industrial zone, and like these neighborhoods in Chicago. And I was like, well, my rent's so cheap, so I'll rent out the studio. So I had a couple friends from art school that stayed in the city, and we did that together. And I was like, I need to get a job like within this month, or else I'm not gonna be able to stay here. I'm gonna have to go like move in with my mom, which sounds horrible. And had that been the case, that hadn't been the case since I was like 13. So I like went, this was in the fall of 2015. I basically I had gotten in fights with Christopher because he didn't want me to do any type of sex work. And I think that I had like negotiated with him because someone that I had messaged on Craigslist had been like, you just need to watch me and tell me I'm pathetic and a loser while I masturbate, and like laugh at me, and I will give you like $50. And it would be like 10 minutes. And I did that a few times, and he was like, yeah, that's fine. I think I like spanked him. That was like my first actual gig of any type. And then I had this friend of mine who, all of the like dusty DIY alternative girls at one point or another had passed through this person Jeff's house, who was this older guy, to put cigarettes out on his feet and ash in his mouth and shit while he masturbated. And she gave me that gig, and I like sold him one of my comics, like my zines, and he was like, your work's really awesome, bro. I used to be in this and that, whatever. So I had like flirted with these gigs that were, I guess, slightly sex work, but I was at the point where, let me be clear, had multiple choices. Actually, I had a place to go back in Maine to live if I couldn't have made my rent, and if I wasn't like such a shit show and had a little more self-confidence and wherewithal, I could have, and if I wanted to, I could have gotten some type of other job. But what I really wanted to do was go full white girl crazy and spiral out and have a dramatic, tragic story of authenticity. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like go full sex work. So I started searching for clients and met this guy, Bob, who was like an old man, and he was my first client. He lived in Michigan, and he drove to Chicago, and we met for dinner, and he brought me money for dinner, and then we kissed. I was drunk. This was like peak alcoholism hours. I was like getting blackout drunk or really drunk almost every day. Maybe, I'm not exactly sure. And getting crossfaded, loving to be high and drunk at the same time. And then we met a second time. I went to like Michigan, and this is like embarrassing for me to say still, but I was like a really bad hoe. I was so cheap and bad at my job. I was my own businesswoman, like making my own prices and rules, and like, I will say I did a kind of good job. The first two people that I had like a few clients, so I would end up seeing like 2 or 3 people at the most a month, and they, I thought it was a really awesome thing that in like 1 hour I could get my rent and then some for like, my studio and my apartment and have extra, and it took no time, because really what I like hated was working inside of the system. And I had thought that naively that art and the art world would save me from having to be in that system, but it was just another way to suck Satan's dick, being in the art world. It was not an escape, and I hated it just as much. And I thought I was like naive and thought it would be instant success, and like I didn't want to do the work required that was so much like bureaucratic and administrative, like applying for all these grants, like doing all this paperwork, having like my taxes, and like working like a job. I didn't like it. And this like escorting work was a way for me to be like, it killed a lot of birds with one stone. I got to like do something dramatic and like kind of be cruising for something bad to happen. I got the authenticity and like some story, and like I got what I thought was like easy money. And for a girl that had daddy issues and like was prone to wanting to self-harm in multiple ways, it was a perfect excuse. And yeah, I also liked the attention, and I liked talking to older men that I would never have been around or had gotten to know in that way. And it was fun to get flown to San Francisco and like stay in a mansion, and like, I don't know, I was basically like, the only thing was that I was pretty scared of the uncertainty of it all. There was no steady paycheck, and so when I finally got my first job, like I got a call back and was able to get a restaurant job. I ended up working in a bar called the Heavy Feather, which was a part of the Slippery Slope, which is in Logan Square on the bar crawl section of Milwaukee Ave. And so I was like doing that and the escorting at the same time. And I was on birth control, I was on Zoloft, I was on weed, I was on alcohol, and I was in a stupor, and I was kind of going a little crazy. And at this point, I started seeing Carl, the guy that I brought to the MTV performance shoot or whatever, and I remember we were walking we lived both in Pilsen, but about a mile walk down the road from each other, and we were not serious at all. I could not get, it was like a murky situation at that point, but we were going back to my apartment, and I remember I got a call from my friend Charlie Shields. I had not heard from him forever, and he was like, Emily, I have some news for you. And he was like, have you heard first? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, okay. Teresa is dead. She killed herself. And this is my freshman roommate, the girl that told me to leave Christopher, the girl who experienced the FBI shit with us, who had all of these issues that I was not surprised. I was not surprised that this had happened. And I don't know what I did. Carl walked me home. I asked to stay with him for the night. I didn't know how she had killed herself, but I remember I called my friends who I could think of. I told my friend Aubrey what had happened. She had not heard. The three of us were really close together in Chicago. And I called and told my other friend, I believe, Leander, or maybe he already knew, I can't remember. And at this point, you know what, I hadn't gone to San Francisco yet because, or maybe I had, but that guy that I went to San Francisco with bought me a round-trip ticket to go to this friend's funeral because her family was on the West Coast. So I went with my friends that knew her, and we were the only people that were from her Chicago life that went there. It was me, Aubrey, Leander, and Mitch. And her family, we stayed with her family the whole time, and they were really happy to know and have the connection of us from her life back in Chicago, because she had gone home and she had not gotten better. She had kind of gotten worse, it seemed. She had issues with voices and I don't know what kind of paranoias or what, but she would literally the last time I heard from her was when I was in Chicago with Christopher, and she was working, handing out peanuts at the 49ers stadium. She was always doing something really weird, and she was emailing me about how they had an issue with people putting porn up on the Jumbotron. But she was staying with her family, and the last thing I had heard from her was kind of weird. She had made her YouTube channel updated, and it had just a really zoomed in picture of my face with my eye or something as the header. And I remember I didn't reach out to her and talk to her about that at all or anything, because it was weird and I didn't check in. And I had these moments that I could look back at and be I didn't reach out to her. Who knows what would have happened if I had, but we spoke some words at her service. We hung out with her family and her sister, whom we had met when she came to Chicago a few times. And I had a really good time. It was there's a space that happens and opens up that's real, that people, unfortunately, especially white people, have to have tragedy or death to open that space up for them. But it is a space that is more real, and as someone who always was increasingly kind of disconnected from how everything felt like a fake world, I was happy to have the realness, even though it was around a funeral and tragedy and my friend's death. So that ended. We came back to Chicago. I continued being pretty spirally. I had a lot of really messy moments, drunk off my ass, walking around in the city, going to meet clients that I had I had never had one really actually bad experience doing sex work, but I fucking didn't. I set it up recklessly and horribly, and I'm lucky because, like, I was idiotic, really. Like, I was drunk, I was not telling people where I was going, like, and anyways, it got to be, like, winter time. I started seeing Carl more than probably other people. He knew what I did and did not care. And I had all this extra time that I was making for myself because I just wanted time. And I was starting to, like, be on the internet researching a lot. Like, without all of the school taking up my time, I was able to, like, get into things that I hadn't before on the internet. And this was like 2015 to 2016. And I was like, I don't know where I started, but I was getting into, like, conspiracies. And that term is really stupid. And conspiracy theorists are really stupid. And it's all just full disclosure anyways. So I was just doing a job by, like, starting to learn about and discover, quote unquote, things that were just being seeded and told to people to start full disclosure. Like, but Carl was the reason, really, that I, like, I used all my time to research shit, because he, like, the first or second night that we were together, and I slept with him on the first date, I had, like, my MO this, year was basically, and for most of my, like, early 20s, was I meet someone at a bar or from Tinder or anywhere, and I would just, like, I had really no standards or low self-esteem, and I would sleep with them on the first night, and a lot of the times that it was just one night stands. But with Carl, I, like, really connected with him, and we started seeing each other, and the second time we met, he was like, I kid you not, like, he was like, hey Emily, so, like, you know how 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, think about, like, all of the amount of time it takes to burn a body in a furnace. And I'm just gonna stop there because I'm on Instagram, but I'm just setting the tone for our relationship. And he had, like, a box of books to show me. He had, like, reptilian shape-shifting videos to show me. He had, like, all this shit to show me. And then, like, at the same time, I was getting into it on my own. And I remember I was, like, hosting a dinner party, and I was on Twitter, I think, and, like, these tequila tweets were, like, going viral, and she was talking about the curvature of the earth, and, like, there's no curve, you can't see it. And I was fascinated, and I was just, like, looking at her tweets, and I told Carl about it, and he was like, oh my god, I just started getting into flat earth too. Like, and basically I would go over to his house, we would smoke, and we would just watch videos all night. And, like, he had me watch this Eric DeBay video, 400 Proofs that Earth is Not a Spinning Ball, and that was when it really clicked, when I watched that video. But I was basically doing as little work as possible to make the money for my rent in my studio to cover it, and working at the bar a very minimal amount, and just really nursing my drinking habit with that, with, like, required whiskey shots at midnight, and all these alcoholics on coke hanging out. And then in my downtime, I would just hang out with him or in my studio making my comics and my artwork and trying to get into, like, group shows and shit. And, like, then just, like, looking at videos and going down all these rabbit holes. And Christopher would send a handwritten letter now or then, show up to my studio. But I was basically getting to the point where this is where a key thing, I was getting to the point where a lot of my real life experiences with the FBI and with being gang stalked, I started finding out more about those things and what they were, what government programs those were and why they were enacted. I found out I got really into looking at gang stalking because all these people had their accounts and they were just like normal people and they didn't know why it was happening to them. And I was getting into the point where they were like talking about electronic harassment and like things that would make somebody go mad or ruin their lives. And like they had like full conferences of people that would get together who had all been victims of gang stalking because they needed someone else to corroborate their story and to talk with, because everyone in the world calls those people schizos and like gaslights them just like the rest of the world gaslights them, and the governments that are doing it gaslights them. And so there were like all kinds of reasons I was getting into things, but like mainly I had always known everything was not right, and I was really excited to be like finding all of the layers and figuring out what was going on more. And I got caught in different layers and had to be like, oh well, that's a psyop to try and make people like hoteps, or that's a psyop and trying to make people white supremacists, or that's a psyop trying to make people just stop at that one layer and get hyper obsessed with it. And I like I just thought I was really going through it. It's crazy at that point in time to like, and that was when like Pizzagate was happening, and like everyone I knew from art school was like still into Hillary Clinton, and I was meanwhile like feeling like a crazy person because I was so deeply researching things that I was like finding the Instagram accounts of her campaign donors and how they had like fucked up shit and like joked about eating babies, and like I was going down a thing that was kind of like I was becoming more and more like everything I believed in or cared about was a lie. And it made me very not want to care about a lot of things that I had put a lot of time, money, and belief into. And so getting more into the chronology of things, I ended up quitting that job at the restaurant or the bar because I got my substitute teaching license together finally, and I started substitute teaching in the Chicago public school system. And I swear I was just doing things to have a cool story or something. I don't know why I ended up constructing this life, but I was basically online researching, smoking weed, going to random schools on the south and west side of Chicago to fill in for K through 12, anything from a gym teacher to a science teacher, with zero experience, the only white person in the school, getting like trash cans thrown at me and people calling me like a cunt and a bitch, and I'm just like, like I'm like having my authentic experience. I was just being a tourist in all these different worlds. I was doing my sex work thing, being like, wow, I'm so authentic. I was being a substitute teacher. I was being a nanny sometimes. I was having a million hands in a different million places, and they were really weird things to be doing at the same time. And basically this was kind of what was happening while still trying to be an artist and basically funneling more and more into just being in the DIY comics scene. That's somehow where it ended up going, where things were like the easiest and where I liked the people the most. I couldn't handle and did not like to be around the art world, and that was the only portion of the art world where I felt at all not like insane and horrible being there. I could not do galleries or openings or the types of people that were in that section of art or whatever. And so that was basically like my first year in Chicago, and I think by the spring it was very, very, very tough to substitute teach, but I was still doing it, and it was going to be summer soon, but I was like, well, that's going to end. So and I still was not comfortable enough to just do escorting, because I always had such a fear instilled in me from my mother about money, that the idea of being completely freelance in that way with no steady income was really terrifying to me. So I think I'm gonna end part 5 now, and I will get into more of the summer of 2016. And I think probably things started to change in some ways by then. And like I said, I don't like telling my story now. At this point in time, it's too close, and I still have shame around it, and I'm still it's. I hope I just am leveling up from doing this, because it's stupid, and none of y'all on here fucking pay. So I'll say it again. If you're watching this, make a wash. Cash.me/$washitall. PayPal.me/washitall. You can DM me if you want to know what washing is and why you should do it. Not only should you do it to make this an equal relationship where you're not just parasiting off of my story, this cult's story, etc., and the soul that it has, because we have all washed, but you should wash for yourself, so that you can make use of this information, so that you can get some soul back and see what it feels like, so you can be tethered to this matrix in your belief where it is stored. So I'll talk to you guys later.